Welcome to the Maryland Historical Society's 2020 virtual annual meeting, Cocktails and Conversation with Mark Letzer. My name is Katie Caljean. I'm the Vice President of Education and Strategic Engagement at the Maryland Historical Society. Many of you have attended an annual meeting with us in the past. But as you all know, this year is very different, and instead of gathering in France Hall, we're all meeting virtually from the comfort of our own homes. And instead of visiting the open bar, you might be enjoying your favorite homemade cocktail or mocktail, whatever this afternoon is calling to you. You may have seen the specialty cocktail for tonight. Mark, he likes an old fashioned, but we're pushing him to try the new old fashioned tonight with a little twist. I have a glass of champagne to celebrate the end of the fiscal year. Although, we're pushing this idea of a new old-fashioned, some things, however, they remain the same. And in just a few minutes, we're going to receive updates from our leadership. Mark Letzer, our president and CEO, is going to talk about the current state of affairs at MCHC, including our response to COVID and how it's impacting the museum and library. Then we will hear from our outgoing board chair, Louise Hayman, who will reflect on her role over the past 5 years. And finally, we'll welcome our new board chair, Daly, who will discuss our plans and goals for the future. After these short remarks, it's time to ask Mark anything. Before we begin, I'd like to run through a few logistics about tonight's program. This program is utilizing Zoom webinars, and in an effort to run a smooth, live experience, your audio and video capabilities have been removed. You are, however, still able to engage with us during the program using the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. You give it a try, type in your first name, and tell everyone where you're watching from tonight. Many of you posed questions for Mark when you registered for this program. Thank you for your questions. But you still can ask questions during this program. And so there's a little icon at the bottom of your screen. It's the Q&A icon. And we'll try to get to those questions as they come in. We'll have staff monitoring that chat feature. So we also wanted to let you know that this program is being recorded, so you could watch it later or you could share with those who weren't able to be part of the program. And there'll be a follow-up email after we have some time to process it, and it will be available in your inbox and also on social media outlets. So we wanted to thank you again for taking time out of your day to join us. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our president and CEO, Mark Letzer.
Thank you, Katie, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 176th annual meeting of the Maryland Historical Society, and the first virtual one we've ever had. These last 3 months have been the strangest and yet the most productive in many ways that we have ever seen at MDHS. When we started the new year, we had no idea that the entire planet would be overtaken by this pandemic. As frightening as those first days were, I must say that the staff of the Society pivoted in a way that I would never have thought possible. Having the entire staff working remotely, we developed our Collecting and Quarantine initiative that has grown to 119 submissions from Baltimore City and 11 counties. Our virtual programs exploded and reached 17 countries and 41 states in April and May. We have doubled our posting in social media channels, and our History Alive newsletter goes out once a week now instead of once a month. Through on-site museum tours, virtual field trips, traveling trunks, and teacher professional development, 23,872 students were served by MDHS education programming in the 2019-2020 school year, including those that have access to the Historical Investigations Portal, an online learning platform that we used at the Maryland Historical Society. 22 out of 24 Maryland counties were served. There have been a total of 35,723 student sessions accessing HIP, the portal that I mentioned, in the 2019-2020 school year. And 10,544 student sessions occurred during quarantine from March 23rd to the present. 18 states beyond Maryland had also used HIP during the quarantine. I'm going to make a brief financial stability update at this time as well. For our fiscal year ending June 30, 2020, we expect to have a slight operating deficit of $49,000. As we navigate the museum closure, MDHS was the beneficiary of the payroll protection plan. This allowed us to focus on our programming and other initiatives. No staff reductions have taken place at MDHS. Is probably what I am the most proud of during this entire pandemic. We also have savings in numerous expense categories. Our endowment has recovered from the market downturns, and we don't expect significant losses for the year. Philanthropy is our biggest challenge area, as we experienced a $120,000 decrease in membership and annual support donations from our 2020 projections. So this is a membership call to action. We can't do it without you. You still have till June 30, which is exactly 2 weeks away still, and you can still help us by the end of the fiscal year by making a gift that we need to push us forward and hopefully even close that operating deficit that we were talking about. Thank you for turning into our visual programs, providing feedback, engaging with MDHS, and for supporting us. Our newly formed Pathways Grant Program announced the winners of 11 organizations in 7 counties across the state, receiving grants of up to $20,000 each to expand the capacity to steward the state's history. The total awarded was $200,000. We are in the midst of updating our fire suppression in our Thomas and Hug building, including our library. This has been a silver lining for us to be able to do all of this that would have been complicated with staff on site, and now we can get it done and it's not even interrupting business as usual. We hope to open back up to the public in early September as we launch a brand new website. And now for the moment of transition. When I assumed the role of president and CEO 5 years ago, I knew I had the backing of an extraordinary woman who would be the best advocate and leader I could ever have wished for the organization. I could easily spend the rest of our time this afternoon covering Louise Hayman's many accomplishments. I will list those contributions that were most transformative to the institution during her tenure. The first, the strategic plan. We started with a feasibility study and created a strategic plan that covered the years 2016 to 2021. We're already only a year away from having to do another one. The last strategic plan that we had was very old. I won't even get into how old. For the campaign, the second contribution from Louise, we hired a consultant group and launched a capital fundraising campaign. The previous one had been 20 years before. Redevelopment of the campus, a third thing. What to do with all our excess real estate, shrinking our operation to the buildings we really can manage and offloading the ones we don't need. That is still ongoing. We hired Cushman & Wakefield to broker the site for us, and we're still working through that now. Rebranding was the fourth one. As if all of this is not enough, we will be rebranding and also opening a brand new website that's going to be extraordinary with enormous amounts of digitized material that's going to enable people, teachers and students alike to research our incredibly envious collections. Louise also created a greater committee structure, such as the Education Committee, formed again after many years of not having one, under the stewardship of Dr. Rick Bell, who chairs it. An advisory council was also formed as a way to encourage board members that stepped down to continue to help the organization. 7, Pathways Grant that I just mentioned earlier. Louise, with her outstanding abilities to navigate state government and procedures, lobbied to create a program based on a museum assistance program that was zeroed out several years ago and that was run by the Maryland Historical Trust. And we'll never forget her concept of statewide, which is basically what I call her Louise Statewide Hayman, because she always complained and was concerned, and rightly so, that we were seen as only a Baltimore institution when our true role is to serve the entire state. And after her tenure, now we don't do anything, plan anything, even talk about anything that doesn't say, well, how is that statewide? So that has been a real gift that Louise gave us. We hired Martha Osterbiel as our community engagement manager to help us reach throughout the state as the Maryland Historical Society, and she has made huge strides with our reach. I could go on, but suffice it to say, Louise, you left your mark like few could have, and thank you from all of us for everything you do and have done. And as of July 1, we will be welcoming Clinton Daly as our new board chair, and we are excited to work with you, Clinton, and we know that you will bring your own magic to the organization and greatly look forward to that journey. Time for you, Louise.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for being part of this evening. My head is so swelled because this is the second time I've listened to Mark's commentary about my accomplishments. And as I say, I am only the nudger in chief. Nothing I accomplished was done by me. It was done by a team of people. So I just want to throw the kudos right back to the people who deserve it. As I thought about what to say tonight, two things came to mind. Number one, this is going to be really strange, sitting in my dining room, talking to you, and I thought, how can I make it real? So I decided to go barefoot. So I'm barefoot, something I wouldn't do in France Hall. And the second thing that came to mind is that this is the 176th annual meeting of the Society, and it's the last one under the brand that Marylanders have come to know and love since 1884. Change is coming this fall, and based on our research, it's going to position us well for a thriving future. So, raging pandemic, wounded economy, civil unrest. This is not the climate I anticipated for my final annual meeting. Isn't it surreal? It's ironic that I, who fears technology almost as much as I fear spiders, is forced to conduct both our board meeting today and our annual meeting right now virtually. Ever concerned about my comfort level, Mark offered to provide me something to ensure smooth proceedings. I thought he was going to send a makeup artist to my house, but instead he delivered a second laptop in case something went amiss with mine. 5 years ago, MCHC adopted a strategic plan that has been the roadmap for all that has been accomplished in that time. As articulated in that now mature strategic plan, we set out to make MCHC more relevant, statewide, and sustainable. All of us have played a part in reaching those goals: board, staff, our members, and our supporters. We knew we had to succeed. We were at a crossroads. We have an enormous responsibility. We are the keepers of Maryland's historical record. Maryland is one of the most successful experiments in the history of democracy. Some of you may know that it's very hard to satisfy me. That goes double for satisfying myself. So I'm not going to spend time listing what's been accomplished during the 5 years. Mark alluded to too many of those things already. But there are a few things that I really want to comment on because they make me so happy as I depart the institution. First of all, there's been an explosion in collaboration, both internally within staff members and divisions of the organization, so that everyone is really sharing a common vision. And externally, we have joined forces like never before with other nonprofits and public institutions, not only working with them, but in some cases, leading them to be more effective. We also do indeed have an increased statewide impact. A few years ago, it was a dream. Now I do think it's a reality. And I know it was difficult to keep this goal in mind, but those days are over. And every time I hear a report from the staff about something that's happening that we're doing beyond the Baltimore city limits, or hear from someone outside our organization about how we played a part in our local historical efforts, it just gives me chills, makes me so happy. Anyway, Mark alluded to restructuring and revitalizing our committee structure. It's kind of a tedious thing to do, but I think it's going to pay big benefits for the future of the institution in determining our focus and our priorities. And it has already moved the ball in the right direction, and I know it will continue to. Another thing I wanted to point out is that we did formalize our government relations function within the organization, and that has paid benefits for us already, and I know will in the future, both financially and in so many other ways. The thing I believe I'm happiest about, proudest of, is the quality of our board. We have exceeded my expectations. After several years of thoughtful and strategic recruiting, we have among the strongest, most qualified boards of any peer institution. And I say that comparing us to others in Maryland and those in other states. The members of our newly created advisory council help fill out any gaps in expertise on our board, and our trustees emeriti continue to be our rocks. And indeed, they do rock. So we are so delighted to have them with us. I'd like to also welcome 4 new board members who were elected just a few moments ago, really. This class of board members is stellar, as have the past few years, but this year is certainly no exception. So we welcome Fred Liner, T. John Sullivan, Catherine Pinkard, and Tyler Tate. None of those are strangers to our institution, and I hope they are known to many of you as well. I regret enormously that I won't be able to share the board table with them, but I will certainly stay in touch with the organization. Not long ago, the possibility that the Maryland Historical Society would attract the commitment of someone of Clinton Daly's talent was remote. Clinton has already distinguished himself with his high level of management in our mission, a level of engagement in our mission, and his hard work at implementing our plans. His standards for nonprofit management are very high, and MDHS is benefiting from his involvement. I have no doubt that it will thrive under his legendary leadership. A word about our staff. The staff of the Maryland Historical Society, as I have said many times, is second to none. I am stunned by the way they have adapted to the crisis of the last 3 months and how well poised they are to tackle future disruptions. They thrive when forced to step away from the status quo. Not many retiring chairs would apologize, but I do want to for my occasional short temper, impatience, and propensity for yielding to distraction. I hope you'll excuse these, making this apology to the staff especially, because these behaviors disguise my commitment to moving MDHS forward. I have never been so optimistic about this organization for many reasons. As I read the staff and committee reports prepared for this meeting, my angst about stepping aside instantly dissipated. MDH is already thriving and on the launch pad for even greater relevance, sustainability, and statewide impact. Now I want to thank you all. We've been a great team. I wish I could walk around and visit with each of you and say hello, but alas, I will have to save that for the next time we are together. I want to thank you all for making the past 5 years the greatest test of my energies and ability and the most satisfying experience any volunteer could possibly have. I've heard that people join boards for 3 reasons: to learn, to have fun, and to make a difference. I know that being part of MDHS has proved the first 2 true, that is, to learn and to have fun. And I only hope that it will prove the third true as well, and that is that I've made a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise.
Good evening. I hope you're enjoying your favorite libation. Louise, I get asked all the time by people saying to me, is Louise going to stay actively engaged? To which I respond emphatically, yes, she's promised me. So everybody can ease back in their chairs and know that this transition of leadership is really a 2-for-1. I also would like to make a series of thank yous in recognition of what I think are lives well lived and jobs well served. And that's evident by the accomplishments that Mark and Louise have outlined at the annual meeting today. But Louise, you're first, and the Board of Trustees and I really want to thank you for your tireless efforts on behalf of the Maryland Historical Society. Your energy, your style, your enthusiasm, coupled with your resolute commitment and patience, even though you don't think you have it, melted away the challenges that were presented by the strategic plan. So this transformative leadership is one that I will have to try to live up to. There are big shoes to fill. But with the help of the staff, who are a team of professionals known for being flexible, innovative, and collaborative, and having can-do attitudes, they know no bounds and will keep us moving forward. I think our dreams and opportunities take real effort and struggle, especially in times like this. But with the staff's passion and sacrifice, they're being realized. Thirdly, I would like to thank President Letzer. Mark, you thrive on learning, on candor, feedback, and personal and professional growth. And you and Louise have built a culture of inclusion and collaboration that is rooted in the trust and loyalty to our organizational mission and to each other. To our board members, I'd like to thank them for their steadfast loyalty to enriching the responsibility of sharing our Maryland history and culture with real purpose and zeal. To the members and donors, especially you all who are in attendance, which I gather is over 100, thank you for believing in our mission, our goals, and our strategy for achieving them. We welcome any feedback at any time. And lastly, to our elected officials, we especially thank them for their understanding of the vital role that the Maryland Historical Society has played as protector and conservator and interpreter of our unique collection. So when I was asked to make a comment or two about what I think about is the future of the Maryland Historical Society, let alone the name change, I think first about how we can best protect the institution's reputation as a trusted source of information. And secondly, about education as the centerpiece of our evolved understanding of the importance of history. It's been said that history will die if not irritated. And given current events, I think that's ever more the case. Our tactical plan of the next 5 years will obviously include completing our capital campaign, expanding our educational offerings and audiences, reimagining our collections in a newly configured campus, and rebranding as a statewide institution charged with serving all who are interested in Maryland's history and culture. And finally, increasing our online accessibility to our archives with a rebuilt and redesigned website. In conclusion, I really would like just to quote the executive director of the Queens Museum in a piece that was in the New York Times this past weekend. She said, "This is a time to consider museums as places of care and to address the need to develop porous cultural institutions that are open, inclusive, and empathetic as we all recover from living through a prolonged period of isolation and loss," end quote. I'm confident that the course set in motion by so many of you will deliver an enviable operating model of sustained relevance and impact for the newly named Maryland Center for History and Culture. And I look forward to getting to know all of you better as we address the opportunities that are entrusted to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Clinton.
Clinton, thank you so much. I think we all should raise a glass to the new MDHS, which will be the Maryland Center for History and Culture this September. We have wonderful things on the horizon. And this idea of community and conversation is something that will carry through beyond, into our future. And so today, in the spirit of dialogue and conversation and community, we are going to have an Ask Me Anything happy hour with Mark. So I hope that all of your glasses are filled. We have some really wonderful questions that have been submitted. I'm going to kick it off with something that I've always thought was interesting about how Mark came to the Historical Society. So, like many of our members, the search for family history was one of Mark's first experiences at MDHS. Mark, what has your journey been like? You've been with us for such a long time in such varying capacities. Can you talk about what it was like when you first came here and
Sure.
what you found?
Absolutely, Katie. It was, I remember January of 1995. So it just had its 25th anniversary of that day. And I just went in there because I needed to find out about one of my ancestors, who was William Farris, who was an Annapolis silversmith and a clockmaker. And ever since I was a little boy, I knew about him. And a portrait of his daughter and granddaughter were on our wall. And again, that was all part of the family lore. And I used to take it off the wall, and in the back was the whole genealogy that came all the way down to me. And I said, how is it possible that I can come down from that lady with that big hat? Who was she and who were these people? And so I just remember one day deciding I wanted to come in and look at his diary. which he had left from 1792 to 1804. One of my aunts had given it to the society in 1974. And I went in and I just was transported. I went to January 1st of 1792 and I was there. And I've never left the place since. And I remember my first experience with Francis O'Neill, who has been there for 40 years in a couple of weeks. And Francis helped me understand how to navigate that place. I had no idea. I was still in my 20s, amazing. And nonetheless, it was really exciting to find this new world. So I did. And 7 years later, the book came out, published by the Maryland Historical Society Press. I work with Jean Russo, an amazing historian that lives in Annapolis. She's been just an extraordinary woman that has helped me understand colonial Annapolis, colonial Maryland like nobody else could have. But I made incredible colleagues along the way, like Ed Pappenfuss, who was the head of the Maryland State Archives for years as well. And I became basically part of the campus fiber. And I lived in the library as much as I could every single weekend. Special Collections was only open one day a month, which was one Saturday a month on the weekend. So, of course, I was working full time. I would come down, and little by little, that became my life and my world. And the fabric of the institution became my own life. And after the book came out, I curated an exhibition based on the book called A Gardener's Tale, The Life of William Farris, a gardener's life. He was a gardener. He was quite a polymath, kind of like Charles Wilson Peel. And it was a Renaissance man of the 18th century, a product of the Enlightenment. And I just became so enamored of the total institution that little by little, I joined a committee, I chaired committees, and eventually I was hired for, to be honest with you, I don't even remember what job. But nonetheless, I think I've done pretty much everything. And then I went to work in advancement, which was development at the time, and became the chief development officer for many years. And then 5 years ago, I became the president, something I never envisioned when I went in to research William Farris.
So it really became a part of you. And I think that's true for a lot of our members who have been around for a long time. MDHS has this magic about it where you find yourself there and it becomes a part of you. And so I think like that act of doing and exploring and discovering is really one of our most like wonderful features. And so
I totally, absolutely agree.
Yeah. So I have a question from Gregory in Baltimore City. And the question is, how have you been responding to research requests while the library is closed? So we have this magic inside. How do people get in there right now?
Well, it's tough. I mean, we have been responding as best as we can right now with what we can do with our online sources to provide it. But without having special collection staff there, it's been limiting. And we are sorry about that. It's unfortunate, but we hope to be able to rectify that. I know we're going to have an enormous backlog when we do actually go back into the building. And already we have reams of requests that we need to answer. But yes, as of right now, as best as we can, but we have no immediate way to fix that, unfortunately, until we can go back in as a staff.
Mm-hmm. So Catherine's follow-up question, Catherine in Baltimore City, she wants to know, when can we do on-site research again? And are my membership dues owed for the next year? How are we handling membership during quarantine?
We're extending membership. We're extending their dues. We're trying to work with people and having them understand that, you know, this is going to have an impact for us next year. We also, one of our impacts has been that we started offering 2-year memberships, which means that the next year our membership line could be lower. But now that we're catching up with every year we're having the 2-year, we're hoping that we're going to keep that in sync. But yes, we're extending it. To answer that question, we are extending that to help people with their memberships during this time, because we have actually been, you know, offline.
Mm-hmm. And then we hope to be on site again in the fall. Date?
We do by September, we hope, in some iteration. Not quite sure with the library. We are installing, as I said, fire suppression. Revamping our fire suppression in what's all the Thomas and Hug, which is the 1965 building that's attached to the library. And the library is having a whole new fire suppression as well installed. So we're not sure yet how that's going to affect researchers, but we're doing our very best to help them and to be able to serve and work with our patrons during this time.
Yeah, a follow-up question, the Spectrum of Fashion exhibition. People are dying to get in there. There's been a few questions about it. What's our plan for extending that?
Now, that's a complicated one. As of right now, it's been extended to December 31. Part of the issue is these fabrics, these textiles are very delicate. Now, the light issue isn't a problem. We've been closed for months, so they've been in the dark. But some of these outfits have a lot of weight when they're on these forms, and they have a shelf life of how long they can be on a form before it starts to pull and tear. So we're going to have to assess that very carefully as to what needs to go back into storage and maybe swapped out, just to make sure we can extend the life as much as possible. But our curators, our registrars are working very closely, trying to really help the public, because we were only open 4 months before this whole pandemic took place.
Great. So hopefully once we're open, there'll be some time for everybody to come on down and check it out.
I certainly hope so. And I hope that everybody has ordered the catalog. The catalog is extraordinary.
Absolutely. It's available through Hopkins Fulfillment Services. So if you haven't gotten your hands on it, I recommend.
That catalog is going to sell out, and it's not going to be reprinted. So I highly recommend, and it's not a substitute for being in the exhibition. We understand that. But yeah. I highly recommend the catalog. It's just gorgeous. It's an incredible job.
Absolutely. So next question. Ryan in Towson wants to know, how have you stayed sane during quarantine? Have you read any good books? Or what are some other quarantine hobbies?
Well, you'd have to ask my family if I stayed sane at all. I think that it's been hard on everyone. I think one of the ways I stay sane is knowing that I am absolutely not alone. Everybody's in the same boat. So when I start to really, complain and get irritable, I start to think, you're not alone in this. You're only one of millions of people that are at home trying to make this work. So I read voraciously, constantly. I read period inventories in bed.
Any recommendations? Any good
period inventories? I was actually I was reading a period inventory just last night of Daniel Delaney in Annapolis. It was actually transcribed by Gregory Weidman.
Greg's on the line. I know she's out there.
Just figuring out what was in every room in the 1760s or 70s. Anyway, like I said, I'm kind of an 18th century nerd. But I read that. I tried to read. I read lots of. I don't read a lot of historical fiction. Okay. I find it confusing. I find I want to know exactly what happened, not some variation of it. So I tend to not read historical fiction.
Okay. What about gardening? I know you love gardening. It's your William Ferris gene.
It is the Ferris gene. It's Ferris. It's interesting that you say that, because when I started transcribing and working with the diary, and I had been a gardener since I was a child. I planted seeds, burpee seed bags that used to come back since I was a little kid. We're living in Latin America. And I remember that when I finally realized the design of Ferris's gardens, all of my garden was designed the same way he had. So circle beds, we had the same plants, the same beds, the same designs. Kind of scary.
It's in there. Absolutely.
I guess it is.
So you mentioned that you grew up in Latin America. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, sure. It's interesting. I did. I was born in Panama. My mother's from Panama. My father's from Baltimore. I have deep, long, hundreds of years roots in both countries. My mother's family got to Panama in the 17th century, and my father's family got here in the 17th century. So I was born down there, grew up there, spent most of my summers in Baltimore, at least a month out of the year. Mm-hmm. And so I got to know a lot of the family here. And that's why I was so interested in our own ancestry. And Greenmount Cemetery is full of my family members. So it's, when I give that tour every year,
I give that. If you haven't, get in line.
Wrote me into that every year. Katie makes me do the Greenmount Cemetery tour, and she tries to make me do.
Sells out.
Sells out. It's just a fabulous place. But it was just interesting perspective, growing up in another culture, another country, and coming here, and sort of bringing that to the forefront.
Absolutely. So Kate in Catonsville wants to know, what is an object from the collection that has intrigued you during your years with MDHS? And
intrigued me.
Yeah. I mean, we can maybe take that as what's your favorite, but if there's a little story, intrigue.
It's so hard to pick from 350,000 objects and 7 million manuscripts, right?
Yeah, but what has, other than Ferris, what has made you want to?
Other than Ferris, well, I'm trying to think. What object intrigues me? I just am in love with all of them, I think Peale's exhumation, Charles Wilson Peale's exhumation of the Mastodon.
Me too.
The painting is incredible, because it took him several years to complete it. He was a frustrated history painter. He was forced because of the economics of the early republic to paint portraits for a living, even though he'd rather have been making historical paintings like when he studied in England under Benjamin West. He would like to have been the history painter to the country here, rather like Benjamin West was to George III in the 1770s. So I love that painting because it's got everything. It's got lightning, it's got horses, it's got an excavation, it's got archaeology, people, it's got two of his wives, one's dead, one's alive. That's how long it took him to do it. So that actually makes me really excited just to be able to see that.
Yeah, you could spend hours with it. Just
and I do. And every time I give a tour of it, I find something else that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, it's a wonderful painting. We're so lucky to have it.
We are.
Yeah. So Allison and Frederick wants to know, so your expertise in silver has obviously been beneficial to the institution, but you're also an ornithologist. How has that ever come in handy at MDHS?
Well, it's interesting. A few years ago, some interns were working in the fashion collection and they had a hat. And the hat had a lesser bird of paradise on it. And during the millinery trade, both birds of paradise, egrets, a lot of birds that had showy plumes were harvested by the millions and actually driven practically to the brink of extinction just to be able to put on hats and on different ladies' outfits until that became illegal in the early 20th century. But during the Edwardian era, that was all the rage. And so, yes, and sometimes I like to look at paintings and see certain birds. And there's a painting of Ignatius Diggs, for example, by Justice Engelhart Kuhn, which was he's a 17th century painter. And he painted this child with an African gray parrot. So I start wondering, how did this parrot get into painting? Obviously, they're already here in the 1690s, and he's seen an African gray. So there's also one at the Hammond Harwood House in Annapolis of young Anne Proctor, painted by Charles Wilson Peale. She has an Indian ringneck parakeet, and another one with a cardinal. So, you know, birds intersect everything, and birds have been my life since I was 3 years old.
I know you raised them, right? You had cages outdoors.
They were my first. Birds were and continue to be my greatest passion. And second by silver, but birds are truly, and I'll tell you why I love silver if you want to know. But
why do you love silver? Go for it.
I love silver because it has all the answers. I love silver because of all the decorative arts. As much as for example, I love furniture is wonderful, but unless it's labeled and unless you really know where it came from, it can sit there and as an enigma. Now you have furniture scholars that'll tell you chapter and verse as to the woods and what it is, but silver often has, more often than not, the maker's mark, so you know who made it. It has an engraving of the initials, and the initials will tell you who owned it. Stylistically, you can look at it. Also, it underscores, especially in the 18th century, silver is a beacon. It's an example of the economics of the time, because this is before banks. So people that had silver, actually, that was their net worth. It was their investment. It was an asset, you know, that could be turned into money if the need arose for that. So I love all of that, but I love the fact that you can place an object in its time and try to understand, why did you own it? You can understand it by the craftsman who made it. Who are you? Was it an order? Was it a stock item? Did they ask for that extra little squiggle on the arm or on the handle? And you know, and how did you use it? And how it was treasured to be passed down from generation to generation to generation as this treasured heirloom of family and of history. That's why I love it so much. It's because of all the stories that are inherently saved within the vessel.
I know every time you take me into silver storage, I learn something new and interesting. So I know you always have a story with it.
Well, for example, think about, you know, we have an American Revolution, right? And then you have people like Charles Carroll of Carrollton, one of our signers. And here we are, we signed the paper, independence, we're now Americans, right back ordering silver from England again, because that's what they always did. You know, it's just,
but what does that mean as like identity? Like it's bigger implications. Absolutely.
Why I love it so much, because there's so much it says.
It's the social history.
Correct.
So I have another bird follow-up question.
Uh-oh.
So David in Baltimore City, took a good sip. Okay, so David in Baltimore City wants to know, why is it called the Baltimore Oriole? Why is it our state bird?
That's interesting. First of all, I'll probably give you more than you want.
I know, that's why I said take a big sip.
Orioles are actually blackbirds, in case you didn't know. They're part of the Icteridae family, which means that they're like your grackles, right? They just happen to have, especially the Baltimore Oriole. We have two Orioles in Maryland. We have the Baltimore and the Orchard. The Baltimore Oriole is bright orange and black. and the Orchard Oriole is more of a rust and black. But let's talk about the Baltimore Oriole. It was called the Baltimore bird even back in the 17th century because its colors were the same as those of the shield of the Calvert family of Maryland. So immediately from the 1670s, 60s, 70s, 80s, it was called the Baltimore bird. Even Mark Catesby, when he came here from England in the 1730s, and he produced the massive 2 volumes, Birds of the Carolinas and the Mid-Atlantic states, all the way down to the Bahamas and Florida, he illustrated it as the Baltimore bird. And I actually this is not a plant, I actually happen to have it here.
I know you surround yourself with bird things.
I do. I have this engraving of the Baltimore bird by Mark Catesby, but this is actually a reproduction done for the Gentleman's Magazine, a British magazine in the 1750s. But you can see here with the pendulous nest. Catesby was a very wooden illustrator. He did better with botanical illustration than he did with ornithological. But again, getting back to it, so the Baltimore Oriole, very, very famous. But what's more fun is that it didn't become a state bird till the 1940s, actually. But the Baltimore Oriole baseball team was from the 1890s.
Mm-hmm.
They
That's
were
all
named in the
very
90s. But the Orchard Oriole was actually called the Bastard Baltimore, because
Oh,
it wasn't quite as brilliant and as pretty as the Orange Baltimore. So it was called the Bastard Baltimore. Tell me that's not a fascinating historical
that's
tidbit.
really interesting.
I told you you'd
Yeah.
get more than you bargained for.
I knew I would. All right, so Scott in Baltimore County wants to know, what would be the top 3 items on your wish list for Maryland-related objects for us to bring into the collection? Money is not an object.
Money is not an object.
I know, right?
No, you know what makes that question so incredibly hard?
Mm-hmm.
We are basically Aladdin's cave of magnificent objects.
Oh.
I mean, one of the things I always say,
That's
is people say,
missing. Yeah.
well, what do we need? You know, it's very hard. I'm really more concerned by bringing in more relevant material of the 20th and 21st centuries at this point, because our richness in 18th and 19th century material are so great that, you know, it would be hard to come up with something that we don't already have triplicates of. So, but it's a very interesting question. Probably a lot more photography, a lot more special daguerreotypes, things that we're missing, big holes in the collection. But again, the collection, we're so blessed to work with such a rich and varied collection. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah. So a follow-up question. Lindsay in Hanover wants to know, what is MDHS currently collecting as a part of Maryland history?
Well, there's 2 answers to that. There's active collecting, which we call responsive curation, which is when we're going after things. For example, the current situation with the protests. So what we're trying to do, as we did with Freddie Gray in 2015, we put a call out for photography. Not that we wanted to interpret it in the moment, but we wanted to have enough of this material that's lacking sorely from the 1960s, for example, when we had the problems of the riots in the 60s, is to have material that we can then look in and mine for information as to current trends and other things. So that's one of the things that we do purposefully go out. We do still receive a lot of gift offers, people that want to give us things. But again, having a collection that is as rich as ours, we don't take a lot of what is offered to us, but we're always, I would say, looking definitely for more modern material to fill in the gaps that we have in our collection that is so rich in the past.
Yeah, and it's this idea, I know we've been around for 175 years. We need to be looking out for the people who are after us. You know, there's sometimes
not only that, but I mean, but you know what we always did, Katie, and I'll tell you why. I mean, I remember when Robert Gilmore gave us our very first painting to the collection in 1845. It was Charles Wilson Peel's George Washington and his generals at Yorktown. But think about it. The revolution had only been over 50 years. Gilmore was alive during it. So in other words, to me, we've always been doing it.
Yeah, that's always been part of our mission.
We've been here so long.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah,
that was actually pretty current and new history back when it came in our collection.
Yeah, exactly. So our role now in this continuum is we need to continue that so the people who come after us will have that benefit.
Like they did for us. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So a lot of our collections are used to teach and to get students to think critically and to juxtapose library collections, museum collections, and to ask good questions of the past. So Joseph in College Park wants to know, what online MDHS resources have educators used for remote instruction during quarantine?
Wow. What items? Say that again, the last part of the
So
question.
what online resources have educators used during quarantine?
Well, we have the Historical Investigations Portal, which is just a fabulous online platform. And I was just reading the metrics earlier of how many thousands of students we've served just in between March and now, which is extraordinary. That, you know, the teachers are starving for content. They're teaching virtually. How do we do this? And bingo, there we have all this wonderful material that our education department has been collating, putting together, and amassing in this program. It's just incredible. So that's how we've been doing.
The beauty of the portal is that it relies on our collections and asks students to pose good questions of our collection. So there are very active lessons and useful for teachers. And that's something else that we really are striving for, is to provide resources that teachers actually can use and implement in their classrooms.
Correct.
All right, so Elizabeth, shifting gears a little bit, Elizabeth in Baltimore City wants to know, what exhibits are you working on for the fall? And as a follow-up question, Alexandra in Baltimore City wants to know, how do you see exhibitions evolving in the age of social distancing?
Okay.
I know, loaded
First of all,
question.
it was really interesting. I was reading about it. That's interesting. I was reading an article that a friend sent me a couple of days ago from the New York Times on 511 epidemiologists opining on how Corona is going to last from here to what seems like eternity. And what it was interesting was everybody was sort of surveyed. Are we talking months? Are we talking a year? Are we talking a year and a half? So they have a slogan that says, "It depends," and I guess we could adopt it too.
Yeah.
There's a lot we simply do not know. We hope, we plan. We have a wonderful Wild and Untamed quilt exhibition that we're trying to open in the fall that is based on William Dunton's work, and we're partnering, and we've really been working with Shepard Prattle and trying to understand the occupational therapy angle of it, which is going to be kind of interesting in this time of isolation and basically, you know, problematic, I guess. There's been a lot of mental anguish during this time, a lot of depression, a lot of issues like that. So
even just stress and anxiety, like we're all feeling it. We're all part of it.
Incredibly stressful.
Right
It's
now,
and I'm convinced it's the not knowing when there's an end in sight.
Yeah.
And that is the hardest thing. And I say every day, if you told me I had 36 more months of this and then it was over, I could deal with that, but it's not knowing. Because as humans, we always want to know that we have a finite end in sight to whatever it is. And this is going to be solved this day. Well, we just can't do that right now. But so far, so to answer, was it Elizabeth's question? Was it Elizabeth that asked?
Elizabeth asked first, what are you planning? And then Alexandra wants to know, how are you adapting?
We're also planning one called Flickering Treasures, which is going to be on the theaters, Maryland theaters, which we're also hoping to open at the second floor of our Thomas and Hug building. So that's for the fall so far. And how are we adapting?
But also we're doing the voting rights exhibition online.
Online. And that's what I was about to say. So that's to answer Alexandra's question in Baltimore, is that we had to pivot and create an online exhibit versus a real exhibit because we're not there. And I think
and also students won't be on site.
They won't be, not for a year.
So we don't want to miss that teaching moment for students. So we need to do it on an online platform.
But to answer Alexandra's question, I truly believe that we will never be the same as we were again. And I don't know to what degree that is. Is it a year, 2, 5, or will we ever? But I think that we have learned that during this pandemic, our virtual exposure has, I don't even want to, what number can we use, Katie? I mean, gone from 40 people in an auditorium to 300 for an online lecture. So it has just simply changed the way and the way we do everything. And I think we're never going to go back completely. I think we're going to, whether it's working from home, some people will always have an option now. That I was the first one that was against teleworking. I admit it, because I wanted people in the office. I thought productivity was there, but the world changed. And we now need to focus on what's the best for the organization and how can we all get the work done and communicate it to a greater audience. So I would say, Alexandra, to answer your question, that we will be probably doing a lot more virtual for a long time to come.
Absolutely. So I have 2 Julies asking questions. So first, I feel like these kind of go together. So we mentioned our name change. How does that affect our mission and our values and what we're striving for as an institution? And then also this idea of how do we make our collections relevant now? How do we take the traditional and bring it into today?
Well, that's two very different questions. Let me start with the traditional into today. And let me answer something that I think is actually a problem. And the problem is that people consider the old stuff not to be relevant. And I think that's really problematic. I think everything in our collection is relevant. It's how we use it. And I think that to just cast this wide net and say, that's no longer relevant, what's relevant is today. Well, you can't tell today without yesterday. It's just simply what history is. We build on our knowledge from one era to the next. So our collections, we are extraordinarily fortunate to have what's considered traditional collections: furniture, silver, textiles, whatever you want to say, the greatest, the richest paintings, whatever. But those are the people that laid the foundation to what we have today. So what we've been doing lately is really trying to juxtapose a lot of this material with more modern material to be able to have a new lens with which contemporary audiences can look at the past in ways that are more meaningful to them in that narrative. Mm-hmm. So let me just use, for example, an exhibition we did with David Brewster a couple of years ago called Structure and Perspective. Well, we juxtaposed some of his very modern, very abstract paintings, some of the things where he were inspired from our collection, and we put the originals next to them, and it was fascinating. One that I'll never forget is a beautiful Charles Wilson Peale portrait of Mrs. Josiah Carville Hall, sitting in all her finery in 1772, holding Thompson's Seasons, this novel that was the popular novel for ladies to read, ladies of leisure, basically. And then posing next to it was this young African-American girl looking at her phone, eating a bowl of ramen. And you're thinking, what is the world is that, right? But in a way, there are people that saw that modern painting that could identify with that girl. They could not identify with Mrs. Josiah Carville Hall, yet they learned that it's basically the same thing. What is the vehicle that the sitter of this portrait is actually using to convey what they're doing, the symbolism? And in a way, it opened up new ways for me to see Mrs. Josiah Carville Hall in a way that I never had before, by focusing on this young, unidentified African-American girl looking at her phone. It's called Cell Phone Glow was the name of the painting. So anyways, so that's just one example. And many years ago in the early 90s, a lot of people know that we hosted Mining the Museum, which was it was a completely extraordinary exhibition that was considered very shocking at the time. And it was done by George Sissel and Fred Wilson, and it just had its 25th anniversary recently. And what people don't realize is that, not only did it happen at the Maryland Historical Society, but it happened under we let it happen. We created the space for that to be. And that was a really pivotal moment for us, because it started with this whole new ways of looking at collections instead of in such traditional top-down ways. It started what you said earlier, Katie, about the conversation, where we're there to learn, to be more of a community-inspired place and space where these objects can transcend centuries and yet tell us different things by using them in a current narrative.
Absolutely.
So I know that's the second question, but
the second question is, so I feel like we for a long time have been in this spirit of, a dialogue past to present, and this idea of bringing in new communities. So when we change our name to become the Maryland Center for History and Culture, how does, maybe the word change isn't the right word, but how are we going to push forward those new values in our mission?
Well, I think
and make sure what guides us?
I think we've already been doing it with our programming. Yeah. I think that changing our name isn't going to really change the way we've been doing things for the last couple of years. It's just they're going to catch up. The name will catch up to what we've been doing in a way. And when I think of the term society, and I'm an old guy, I like the term society, but unfortunately, everything in the 19th century was called a society because it was a grouping of people. It was not meant as exclusionary necessarily. You had the Royal Geographic Society, the National Geographic Society. All of these were societies because they were meant to be a gathering place. It's a term that has been eclipsed and has grown to be basically, this is a very we're separatists, we're elitist. This is not, a society is a place to separate, not to bring together. And, or even worse than that, in our current climate, people don't know what it means at all.
Right.
So people would walk by the Maryland Historical Society and not know what was inside. They didn't know they were welcome. They didn't know if they could come in or what they were going to see when they came in. So I think that I think it's going to be very refreshing to know the history and culture. We're still a history organization, but we're also, by expanding the culture, we're expanding to many different kinds of people that may not have found themselves or seen themselves within our walls previously.
Exactly. Like, we want to have a community. We want everybody to be a part of MDHS. That's how we started this program. Like, everybody on this call has some affinity for the organization. We want to expand that community and create a dialogue, which is what we're doing in this program, and allow people to discover, which is exactly what you did when you stepped foot on our campus.
Absolutely.
So I don't know, like what I was just saying, I don't know if change is the right word, but I think we're just going to bring those values to the forefront.
Well, Kitty, we're evolving. I mean, nothing ever stays the same. And so we evolve the way we just have to keep up with the times. We need to be able to morph with them as we go along. If we don't, we get left behind like anything else. Yeah,
we need to be now. So one final parting question.
Sure.
So, and this is from me. So what do you think your biggest challenge has been as a leader in quarantine? And have you learned any lessons?
Wow. I think the biggest, without a doubt, because I've thought about it a lot, the biggest challenge is to keep all of the staff of the institution, which is extraordinary, focused and positive. That has been my overriding. Number one, my first decision was that no matter what, nobody's getting laid off, even though people were talking. That was before we even got the PPP loan that came through to help people keep their staff. I'd made a commitment to the staff. They weren't going anywhere. And to me, that is the most important thing, because without our staff, we can't move. We don't keep moving forward. So that has been my greatest, what I would say, my greatest stressor. But I also think that my greatest achievement is keeping positivity. And we all have. And, with you leading education, with Allie leading in the museum, we have been able to keep everybody as busy or busier at home than they were at work. So that has been the most stressful of all leadership issues, is keeping the staff buying into the fact that this is good, we're going forward, we're doing great things. Yeah.
What do you think you're going to carry with you into the future?
From this period?
Yeah, from this time.
From this, basically never say never. Whoever thought
I know. Absolutely.
Whoever thought this would happen. So.
I at first I thought it was a never, but here we are.
Here we are.
So, it's been an amazing journey. So thank you for leading us through it.
Well, it's been my pleasure and my great honor, actually. And I didn't mention it earlier in my remarks, but I do have to say that the staff of the Maryland Historical Society is second to none, like Louise did say. And I mean, we could not do what we do without them. The synergy and the work has been exponential, even in this crisis.
Yeah, we're small but mighty. We're able to move quickly. So Indeed. That's one of our strengths. So thank you, Mark, and thank you to all of our members for joining us this evening. Your support allows us to continue educating the public about Maryland's diverse history. We couldn't do it without you, as Mark said earlier. We hope that you'll join us virtually next Wednesday at noon to chat with one of our board members, Dr. Rick Bell, when he'll be giving presenting another conversation called Let's Talk About the Constitution, the 3/5 Clause. He'll be exploring the origins and the far-reaching impacts of the 3/5 Clause, the most infamous part of the original 1787 federal Constitution. So that should be a lively conversation. He is a University of Maryland professor. So we're looking forward to that. And so we communicate all of our updates, resources, programs through our e-newsletter and on our social media channels. So make sure that you subscribe or follow us to stay in the know about what's happening at MDHS. And with that, thank you all. Take care and good night.
Good night. Enjoy your cocktails.